The courtyard shimmered beneath the late spring sun, the kind of afternoon where everything looked slightly golden, photogenic, perfect, almost dishonest. A few students milled around the fountain with their yearbooks already open, laughter rippling from group to group. Somewhere behind me, someone had started playing music on a portable speaker, that sugary graduation pop song everyone would forget in a week. I held the yearbook in my hands like it was glass, not because it was fragile, but because something in me already knew it would break. The cover was embossed with our school crest, and beneath it, the words, Class of Visionaries, 20XX. It should have felt like a moment of pride. Instead, the air felt thinner than usual, as if everything around me knew what was about to happen before I did. "Hey, check page 1012, someone called out, snorting. "You have to see this one." I didn't move. Around me, a few heads turned. I saw one girl, tilt her head, eyes scanning. Then her lips curled. Oh my God. That's her quote? Really? My fingers trembled over the edge of the book. I hadn't opened it yet. I still believed, in that last flicker of ignorance, that the quote I'd chosen, carefully, quietly, after 3 nights of revisions, was sitting exactly where I had left it. A line from Virginia Woolf. Simple, quiet, something about becoming one's own author, not a character in someone else's play. I remember submitting it with a small smile, thinking maybe this one thing, this one page, would belong only to me. I opened the book. Page 1012. My photo smiled back at me. Black uniform, windblown bangs, and the softest trace of a dimple. The lighting wasn't flattering, the print looked off, but none of that mattered. Because underneath my name, where my quote was supposed to live like a promise, there was something else. Love is like chocolate, melts when things get too hot. Stay sweet, future me. The words didn't register at first. I blinked, reading them again. Once. Twice. My mind scrambled for logic. A glitch? A layout error? Then came the laughter. It started like a cough behind me, then spread like a ripple. Some classmates tried to hold it in, eyes darting between me and the book. Others didn't bother. A boy from physics, one I'd never even spoken to, doubled over. "Did So-yeon seriously write that?" he said through a wheeze. "Wow, and I thought she was supposed to be deep." I stood there, still staring at the quote, as the space around me collapsed inward. The book felt like it weighed 100 pounds. My arms were shaking. Not from anger, not from embarrassment, but from something deeper, something colder. A realization blooming in slow horror. This wasn't a mistake. I looked up. They stood across the courtyard, her fingers running absent-mindedly through her perfectly curled hair. Her uniform looked like it had been tailored. Ironed creases, skirt falling just above regulation, necktie knotted with lazy precision. She was surrounded, of course, 3 girls flanking her, laughing like backup dancers to a soloist. And then, as if sensing the shift in the air, she turned. Our eyes locked. She tilted her head ever so slightly, lips tugging into the softest, sweetest smile, one that said, "Oops." There was nothing accidental about it. She blinked, slow and unbothered, before mouthing something I couldn't quite hear. I didn't need to. Her posture said it all. Relaxed. Satisfied. A performance. Finished. "You should have stayed quiet," her gaze seemed to say. "Now look what happens when you think your words matter." I closed the book. My fingers curled tightly around it, the corners digging into my palm. The laughter was still there, echoing across the stone tiles, too loud and too distant at the same time. The scent of cherry blossoms floated past, carried by a breeze that felt cruel in its indifference. As I took a step back, no one stopped me, no one asked if I was okay. That would have made it real, acknowledging it. Easier to pretend they hadn't noticed. Easier to let it happen. I found a bench near the edge of the courtyard, behind a row of overgrown hedges. My legs gave out the second I sat. The yearbook slipped from my hands onto my lap, and I stared at the cover again, as if it might shift into something else if I looked long enough. A part of me wanted to cry, another part refused. Because crying would mean I had accepted it, that I had been mocked and hurt, and let them see the bruise. No, not here. I reached into my bag, pulled out a pen, one of those thick black gel ones I used for annotations. Without thinking, I pressed it against the page, straight into that clumsy line. The ink splattered at first, a blot of defiance, then I slashed it out completely, line by line. The pen cracked in my grip. I stared at it, the broken shell, the smudge across the page, the ink now staining my thumb. This wasn't an accident, this was an edit. And someone, Daeun, had once again decided what version of me the world was allowed to see. Not clever, not thoughtful, not me. Just a joke. The world tilted slightly, not in motion, but in meaning. Everything I thought I could trust, submissions, systems, silence, had betrayed me. I looked up at the sky. It was too bright. The final bell rang in the distance, long and hollow, like the end of something I hadn't even noticed was slipping away. Around me, the courtyard emptied slowly. A few students glanced my way, but didn't stop. I watched them go, book bags slung over shoulders, voices rising into idle, careless chatter. Daeun passed by. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Because of what she had done was already written. As Soyeon watches Daeun's back disappear into the sunlit hallway, her hand slowly reaches into her bag, this time not for a pen, but for her phone. Her camera hovers over the inked-out quote, "Save as evidence," she whispers, and presses capture. The photo remained in my camera roll for weeks. Not because I didn't know what to do with it, but because I couldn't bring myself to delete it. Every time I looked at the ink-slashed quote, something unfamiliar stirred inside me. Not fury, not even sadness. A kind of cold remembering. It wasn't the first time Daeun had edited my words. It was just the first time everyone laughed. I didn't sleep well that night. The ceiling in my room glowed faint blue from the screen light, shadows of my bookshelves stretching long across the walls. I lay there, fingers tapping my phone screen, aimlessly scrolling, rereading old messages, revisiting forgotten class chats, searching for a timeline I hadn't realized I needed to see. And it started piecing itself together like a soft-spoken puzzle finally learning to shout. "You're smart, Selayan, but you make people feel dumb without realizing it." That was Daeun during second-year speech prep. I'd just finished presenting my outline on marginalized narratives in literature. The teacher had clapped, a few students nodded. Then, as we were packing up, Daeun leaned in and offered that line with a smile. Warm voice, glitter lip gloss, friendly tone. The kind that doesn't feel like an insult until you're already walking away. At the time I had thanked her, I sat up, phone screen burning into my vision. I opened our old class group chat, quiet now except for exam reminders and half-hearted birthday messages, and searched her name. Message after message surfaced. "Daeun, I think Seoyeon's draft is too literary again. Maybe we can simplify it so it's more group-friendly?" "Hey, Daddy, I love how mysterious she is, but it does make her kind of hard to approach. Lol. Daeun, should we vote on the representative? Objectively, I think someone more outspoken fits better." My chest tightened. There were no harsh words, no cruel language. Just a pattern, a softness that wore me down, thread by thread. I opened my laptop, the screen casting a dull reflection onto my face. The midnight silence around me was sacred, untouched. I pulled open an empty folder and named it Edits They Made. And I began collecting. Screenshots of group chat messages, photos of class feedback, PDFs of project drafts with her suggestions highlighted in pastel pink, even my original yearbook submission email still sitting in the school archive with my quote untouched. I copied it all. Not because I planned to do anything, not then, but because I needed to prove to myself that it had happened. It wasn't in my head. I leaned back in the chair, my spine ached, my eyes stung. The ceiling was faint with dawnlight, that pale hour where everything is gray and unreal. And still, one memory floated back, uninvited. Third year, Literature Festival Prep. Our class had been tasked with designing a small anthology. I'd written a short story, A quiet, meandering piece about a girl who collects sounds. It was odd, a little abstract, but honest. The teacher loved it, said it felt emotionally tactile. Yoon had read it with a furrowed brow. Her feedback, "You're good, but this is dense. Maybe try something funnier or lighter, easier to connect with." I'd nodded. I didn't argue. I even rewrote parts of it. It never made it into the anthology. Instead, Daeun's piece about a girl who falls in love through library notes got top billing. Her story wasn't bad, it was charming, accessible, sprinkled with quotes from famous authors as if to say, "See, I know the canon too," but it didn't feel lived in. Mine had been real, and yet I had stepped aside. The realization hit slowly. She hadn't bullied me. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't posted cruel comments or started rumors. She edited the way people saw me, softly, consistently, always under the disguise of helpfulness. I opened a new document and began to type, first tentatively, then faster. She never used scissors. She used pink highlighters and compliments that tasted like sugar water. She didn't erase. She softened the edges until I disappeared into the margins. I stopped, stared at the sentence, and then I saved it. Another folder. Untitled drafts. By the time morning light filled the room, my desk was scattered with old printouts, drafts of essays with constructive comments, voting slips from the council election I'd lost by 2 votes. One of them, I now remembered, was hers. My eyes drifted to the untouched voice memo app on my phone. I opened it. No recordings. I stared at the screen. There was so much I had never said out loud, so many things I'd buried under politeness and restraint, the quiet dignity I'd clung to like armor. I hit record. The red light blinked. "I don't think I was ever invisible," I whispered. "I think they just didn't want to look closely, because I made them feel something they couldn't name." My throat tightened. I thought staying silent was mature, that letting people misunderstand me was better than making them uncomfortable. But silence doesn't protect you. It just makes you easier to reshape. I stopped the recording and didn't play it back. It wasn't for anyone else. It was the first thing I'd spoken in my own voice. Outside, the city stirred awake. Buses hissed along wet pavement. A bird chirped once, then vanished. I stepped toward the window. The reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar, like someone still mid-transformation, not yet finished. The yearbook lay on my desk, the page still scarred. I walked back and placed a single yellow post-it over the false quote. On it, I wrote in small, precise handwriting, "I do not exist to be simplified," and beneath it, a new message arrives on her phone from an unknown number. The preview reads, "Hey, did you see what they posted on the alumni page about your quote? They think it's real." Doyen doesn't open it. Her eyes stay on the screen, wide and unblinking. The voice memo still glows red. The message from the unknown number remained unopened, its preview hovering at the top of my screen like a question I didn't owe an answer to. I let it fade. Instead, I opened the university course portal and scrolled slowly, deliberately through the list of electives. My finger paused over narrative therapy and the self, the description brief, but something about the phrasing caught me. Healing through story structure, reclaiming personal voice through written narrative. The cursor blinked at the edge of the screen. The room was quiet, my coffee cold beside the keyboard. Outside, early autumn bled across the sky, crisp leaves clinging to their final moments on the trees lining the street below. I clicked enroll. That fall, my days filled with whiteboards scribbled with archetypes, stacks of case studies, and theory-heavy lectures on identity dissonance. Words like cognitive distancing, metaperception, and discourse ownership were thrown around like tennis balls in seminar rooms. But what I remembered most wasn't the terminology. It was the first time I put pain into a prompt, and someone read it with reverence. Professor On had assigned us a reflective essay, write about a moment when your voice was taken from you and how you found it again. I stared at the assignment for 2 days before typing the first line. My silence was never passive. It was chosen, curated, and shaped until it no longer sounded like me. I didn't use names, I didn't mention the quote, I let the sentences walk around it, quietly, a girl whose words were always too much, a classmate who meant well, an edit that rewrote more than a line, it rewrote her. I submitted it at 3:12 a.m. The air was cold that night, my breath visible in the light of the desk lamp. 2 days later, Professor On began the class with an announcement. I read one essay this week that stopped me cold. It didn't ask for pity, it asked to be seen. With the writer's permission, I'd like to read a portion aloud. I froze in my chair. As he began, the classroom fell silent. Words I'd written in a whisper were now rolling off his tongue with slow, deliberate weight. A few students glanced around, searching for the author. I kept my eyes on the corner of my notebook. My pulse beat in my ears like a second hand. When he finished, there was a pause, then a murmur. A girl in the third row whispered, "That was beautiful." Another boy nodded. Someone else raised their hand and asked, "Do you think the writer ever confronted the person who silenced them?" Professor On smiled. The piece doesn't answer that, which is why it's powerful. The conversation spiraled into debates about indirect trauma, the ethics of silence, how some wounds become stories only when they're ready to leave the skin. No one knew it was mine, and yet I had never felt more heard. Later that week, I found a folded note slipped under my desk folder. The handwriting was small, neat. "Was that yours? If it was, you're the kind of writer who makes people ache, in the best way." Unmei. She had soft eyes, almost unreadable, and a voice that leaned towards softness even when it laughed. We'd sat near each other in 2 other classes, always polite nods, never more. That afternoon, she walked beside me after class. The campus was quiet, golden light pooling through the glass roof of the humanities building. "You ever been to the Thursday night writing sessions?" she asked, glancing sideways. I shook my head. "You should come. It's not official or anything, we just bring pieces and share. No grades. No pretense." I hesitated. Her gaze didn't pressure me, it lingered with invitation, not expectation. "Come once," she said, pushing open the glass door. "Bring something raw." That Thursday, I printed an old piece. One I had written the summer after graduation. A letter I'd never sent, addressed to no one, or maybe to myself. The writing room was tucked behind the art history archives, small, dusty. It smelled like paper and vanilla-scented hand lotion. 6 students sat in a loose circle, each holding printed sheets and mugs of coffee. I watched first, listened. A girl read a poem about her mother's silence. A boy read a short piece about waiting in a hospital hallway. Every word felt lived in. Then Unmi looked at me. Not with expectation, but trust. I nodded, hands shaking slightly as I unfolded the pages. As I read, something inside me cracked. Not open, but outward. I didn't dramatize it, I didn't cry. I read with steady breath and a voice that no longer shook, even when the words cut close to bone. When I finished, no one clapped. That was the rule. But someone whispered, "Damn." And Unmi leaned over, tapped my coffee cup with hers, and said, "You should publish this." I looked down at the sleeve. Someone, probably her, had written in black marker, "You should publish this." And I stared at it and smiled for the first time in months without hesitation. At the end of the session, as everyone filed out, Unmi turned and asked, "Have you ever thought about writing something longer, like a novel?" Shoyin paused, hands still hovering over the light switch. Her voice came low, calm. "I've thought about writing the truth, without asking anyone's permission this time. I've thought about writing the truth, without asking anyone's permission this time. Et su petro, vos mal su petrico." I didn't say it for effect. The words had been forming for weeks, hiding beneath every sentence I never said aloud. The hallway lights buzzed above us, and Unmi didn't reply right away. Her eyes softened in that particular way people's eyes do, when they recognize something they once had to earn in themselves. She nodded, once, then walked away. The door clicked behind her, and I stood there in the stillness, hand on the light switch. That same light cast a long reflection down the floor tiles. A quiet corridor, a quiet girl, a voice returning through breath and keystrokes. That night, I didn't sleep. The screen glowed well past 2 a.m., and the keyboard under my fingers grew warm with persistence. I named the document the cropped quote. It wasn't a memoir, it wasn't revenge. It was fiction, disguised, distilled, rearranged, but underneath every paragraph, the veins pulsed with memory. She was the kind of girl you noticed only when you needed someone invisible to carry your mistakes. The kind of girl who apologized for walking too quietly. The opening line stayed untouched through every revision. In the story, there were two girls. One wore confidence like perfume, always present, always lingering in rooms she had left. The other had learned how to fold herself into shadows, not because she was afraid of the light, but because every time she stepped into it, someone rewrote the way it fell on her face. I didn't name them, not once. But anyone who knew me, anyone who really read, would recognize the emotional DNA under each sentence. I built them from my journals, from the folded scraps of memory tucked between textbooks and old inboxes. The protagonist, quiet and observant, collected fragments of erasure, subtle phrases that bruised without evidence, gestures so polite they bled cruelty. She didn't fight back in loud ways. She began writing, and her words saw people the way they never saw her. Each night, I worked until the screen blurred. Coffee cups lined my desk like a battalion of hollow soldiers. Sticky notes littered the wall, half-quotes, clipped metaphors, symbols waiting to settle. I pinned my original yearbook quote above my desk, the paper thin and curling at the edges now, but the words were still mine. I am not a character in someone else's story. Sometimes I stared at it when I got stuck, when I hovered over the delete key too long, wondering if I sounded too angry, too bitter, too obvious. Was I allowed to say these things? To be sharp instead of soft? One night, I rewrote a confrontation scene between the girls. In the first version, the antagonist offered a tearful apology, a final page redemption arc. It felt false. In real life, Dayun never apologized. She never confessed, not directly. What she did was smile, so I deleted it. Instead, I wrote this. You raced me while pretending to help. You said you were guiding me, but all I remember is how you handed me scissors shaped like compliments. Why didn't you stop me? Because I wanted to believe I was wrong about you. That's the worst part. That version stayed. And that was the night the story began to breathe on its own. It was no longer about catharsis. It was about reclaiming authorship. I stopped trying to soften the edges. I let the dialogue bite. I let silence become its own form of punctuation. The story didn't demand pity, it offered understanding. Brutal, clean, unsentimental understanding. One morning, after a week of heavy rain, my laptop crashed. The screen went black, my breath caught, a soft curse escaped under my breath as I pressed the power button over and over, knuckles pale. I stared at the blank screen, heartbeat climbing. Everything. Gone? No backup. Only a single autosave file floating in some unknown corner of my hard drive. I exhaled and left the room, unable to sit in the stillness. Outside, the sky was still soaked in gray. The world had that post-storm smell, wet asphalt, the ghost of thunder. When I returned 30 minutes later, the screen had flickered back to life. And there it was. Recovered document, the cropped quote, autosave version 6. A single corrupted line had duplicated itself 17 times in a row. I didn't disappear, you stopped looking. I stared at it, chills crawling across my arms. I kept all 17 repetitions. Sometimes, pain doesn't need editing. By the end of the third month, I had nearly 82,000 words. I didn't show it to anyone. Not Unmi, not Professor An, not even myself, fully. I let it sit like a letter I hadn't decided whether to send. I printed one copy. The pages were heavy in my hands, warm from the printer, thick with breath I had buried for years. I ran my fingers over the title page. No pseudonym, no initials, no dedication. Just the title and the cropped quote, and beneath it, a single line in italics. This time, I write the ending. As she gathers the printed pages into a binder, her phone buzzes. A message. Unknown sender. No name, no preamble. I think I read something of yours today. It felt familiar, like something I once ruined. Doyen's hand tightens around the final page. The message stayed unread. I think I read something of yours today. It felt familiar, like something I once ruined. I didn't open it. I left it blinking quietly between a food delivery ad and an app update reminder. My name wasn't on the cover. There were no author photos, no interviews, not even a social profile connected to the pen name. The book existed in anonymity, like a whispered truth in a crowded room. Those who needed to hear it heard it. I chose the name Swai Han, a blend of nothing. A syllable from an old notebook and the surname of a woman I once saw cry in a bookstore aisle after finishing the last page of a novel. She looked free. The publisher was small, independent, a hidden alleyway press run by people who believed stories mattered more than marketing. They said it might take a while. Readers were slow to trust unknown names. I was fine with that. The first month, sales trickled. A blog with 3 followers posted a line from Chapter 6. Silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's the last thread holding you together. Then another reader commented beneath it, "This book read me instead." 2 weeks later, a tweet surfaced. A screenshot of the same passage. No context, no author. By morning, it had 8,000 likes. By evening, 40,000. I watched it unfold from the same desk where I had bled those words out. My laptop pinged with a dozen new emails from the publisher. The bookstore down the street displayed it quietly, spine out tucked behind a pastel romance novel. I visited it like someone visits a grave they can't admit is theirs. The girl behind the counter wore her hair in 2 braids. She didn't look up when I passed, didn't recognize the glance I gave the third shelf from the left. The irony made me smile. The reviews came next. A scalpel disguised as prose. For anyone who ever felt overwritten in their own story. I didn't cry, I remembered. That's worse. No one knew it was me. No one asked. Then the messages began. Former classmates. Some vague, others certain. One wrote, "This sounds like you. Did you ghostwrite it?" Another, "There's a scene in the book, page 148. It felt like sophomore year debate club." I responded to none. The tension didn't come from being discovered. It came from knowing they were reading the very wounds they once dismissed. Then came the moment I hadn't prepared for. Daeon reposted a screenshot on her story. This scene was unmistakable. "You didn't ruin her with cruelty, you ruined her with your curated kindness. The kind that cuts softer and deeper because it hides behind applause." Her caption, "This one hit hard." 3 dots. A heart emoji. Nothing more. My fingers went cold. I stared at her profile photo. Still smiling, still perfect, still framed in some boutique cafe filter. The message from before, was it hers? I clicked her profile, scrolled, paused on a photo from years ago, graduation, the hem of her skirt just brushing the stage steps, smile sharp, eyes triumphant. I remember that day. I was sitting in the back row, the quote already haunting me, the applause thundering for someone who hadn't earned it. I leaned back in my chair, now, present day, breathing in the full circle. She had no idea the book was mine. Or maybe she did. Maybe she had always known what she had done. And that's what made her share it. Not to praise it, to confess. It wasn't an apology, it was a crack. In the next few days, I noticed other familiar names resurface. Minji from Group Project Hell, reading this was like looking in a mirror I had avoided. Yoon, I think I was one of the background characters in this. The irony sliced clean. They were sharing the book, quoting it, crying over it, and not one of them knew the quiet girl with the scraped voice had written it. That was the revenge, not exposure. Resonance. At night, my room filled with unopened packages, readers requesting signed copies sent through the publisher. Each one came with a note. This made me feel less alone. Your words saved something I thought was broken forever. I wish I had said something back then. They didn't need to know my name, they knew the story. And this time, no one could crop my voice. Soyeon stares at the screen. Beneath the message, another unread DM. This one is from Da-eun. I know it was you. I know it was you. The message sat unopened in my inbox like a breath held too long. Her name wasn't attached, just the handle from an old email address I remembered seeing once on a class project form. It was unmistakably her, though. Det-yoon didn't need to sign anything. She never did. The way she phrased things always sounded like she was standing in front of you, chin tilted slightly, voice lined with sugar and control. My fingers hovered. I clicked. The message unfolded in slow scroll, longer than I expected. No greeting, no emoji, no explanation. I didn't think you'd still have a voice for this. I thought I took it. Maybe that's what scared me when I started reading. The sentences bled downward, raw and increasingly disassembled. I kept reading anyway. Chapter after chapter, I saw pieces of myself, and not the flattering ones. The girl who edited smiles, who suggested softer phrasing when she meant, be smaller, who made helpful sounds like obedience. I used to think I was protecting you from being too much, but really I was protecting myself from being not enough. Then, a link, a locked folder titled Confession Zip, password, hint, graduation day. I typed it in. The screen blinked, the cursor spinning before unfolding a single folder. Inside were scanned pages, photos of spiral-bound notebook paper, margins curled, ink faded in places. I clicked the first image and froze. Her handwriting, slanted, familiar, precise. The page was dated our second year, labeled Private Thoughts. She makes me feel invisible without even trying. I hate how she never raises her voice and still people lean in. Teachers like her because she doesn't need them. I need them. I need someone to tell me I'm good. I scrolled. Each page was a wound, hers. Scribbled frustration, half-crossed sentences, annotations of emotional insecurity dressed in theatrical honesty. I changed her quote because I wanted to feel bigger. That's the truth. I told myself it was harmless, funny, but the look on her face, I still see it. My chest tightened. It wasn't shock, it wasn't anger. It was something softer. A pressure behind my ribs that I didn't have a name for. I leaned back in the chair. The room around me had fallen silent. Even the street noise below was dulled by rain, the kind that tapped gently at the window, as if the sky was trying not to be intrusive. I clicked to the next page. A drawing. Small, almost hidden, a girl sitting at a desk in the corner of a classroom, a tiny caption under it. This is how I see her, always thinking, never needing anyone. I wanted to be her. I hated that. My vision blurred. I wiped at my eyes, but the tears came anyway, not out of pain, out of recognition. The war had never been about me. It was hers. She had been fighting the space I took up by simply existing, the way she couldn't. I clicked a file marked Batto. It was a voice memo, 43 seconds, her voice unedited. I don't think I ever wanted to hurt you. I think I wanted you to see me, like really see me. And when you didn't, I made it impossible for you not to. I know that's not an excuse. I wouldn't forgive me either. This isn't a request. It's just a record. Click. Silence. I sat there, listening to the absence that followed, more full than sound could ever be. My eyes landed on the corner of my desk, the original print copy of the cropped quote, edges worn now from touch. Tucked into the back cover was a sticky note I'd once saved from Unmi. "Your voice made me braver." I reached over, opened the notebook where I stored lines I never published, and copied one of Dayun's entries. I changed her quote because I wanted to feel bigger. I wrote it down, then, underneath, slowly, deliberately. "You didn't make me smaller, you made yourself hollow." And still, I didn't hate her. Not anymore. Hate was sharp, clean. This feeling was heavier, like standing in a house that had collapsed on someone you didn't know was inside. I closed the file. I didn't reply. She didn't ask me to. As Soyeon closes the laptop, her phone buzzes again. A new message from her publisher. Subject: "Final reminder, your panel interview is tomorrow. We've confirmed that your old school's literature club will be in the audience." She looks up, her reflection caught in the dark window. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime that didn't match the weight in my chest. I stepped into the broadcast studio's waiting lounge, the lights too bright, the walls too white, the air cold in that curated, expensive kind of way. Across from me, a framed printout of the cropped quotes cover stared back from a brushed steel easel. "Anonymous voice of a generation," the tagline read. It felt absurd, like watching someone applaud a diary you once buried in the back of a drawer, thinking no one would care if it rotted. The panel started in 15 minutes. No cameras, audio only. That had been my condition. The producer gave me a headset and a bottle of water. "We'll keep your name off the transcript. The audience just wants your voice." I nodded. My hand shook slightly as I adjusted the mic. When the red light blinked on, I inhaled. "Can you share the moment," the host asked gently, "that first made you feel like your story was no longer your own?" I hesitated. My fingers tightened on the armrest. Then I spoke. "There was a quote," I said slowly. "Something quiet, something I chose to mark the end of high school, something that felt like mine. It got replaced. On purpose." The silence on the other end was intentional, respectful. "I never told anyone." I laughed with them, pretended it didn't matter, but I remember that moment clearer than any award I ever received. I didn't mention her name. I didn't need to. Some stories walk into the room before you introduce them. When the episode aired 2 days later, the reaction wasn't loud, it was collective. Classmates posted screenshots of the interview transcript. "Wait, didn't this happen at our school?" "I think she's talking about graduation." That quote, I remember it. We all laughed. God. The anonymity I'd chosen turned into a mirror they all leaned into. The hashtag trended for a day. The quote was real. I didn't respond. I watched. I watched the same people who once ignored me post stories saying, "We should have known better." The bookstore down the street redecorated their feature shelf. The top corner now read, "Books that changed our readers." Beneath it, the cropped quote, spine forward, next to a stack of poetry volumes. I stood outside for a long time before I stepped in. The bell above the door jingled softly. It was late afternoon, and the golden light through the window panes warmed the carpeted floor, giving the whole place a hush, like something sacred. And then, through the corner of my eye, I saw her. Standing by the shelf. She wore a beige coat, unbuttoned. Her hair was tied back, messier than usual, as if she'd rushed or hadn't cared enough to perfect it. She reached for the book slowly, like it might recognize her touch. Her fingers hovered, then landed on the cover. She didn't look around. She opened it to the first page. The dedication read, "To those who were rewritten but learned how to hold the pen again." She closed the book and exhaled. There was something in her eyes I hadn't seen since high school. Uncurated stillness. Not defeat, not regret even. Recognition. As she turned to the cashier, she passed a mirrored wall. The reflection caught both of us. For a second, our eyes met. Through glass, through time. She paused, held the stare, didn't speak. She didn't need to. I didn't smile, neither did she. The moment broke. She walked to the counter and bought the book again. Her voice was soft, the same voice she used back then when she wanted to sound kind. Outside, she passed me. We were inches apart. Then she stopped. No greetings, no apology, only a whisper. You didn't erase me, you reflected me. My breath caught. And then she walked away. I stood in the bookstore, spine straight, heart full. Not with victory, but with something more complex. A quiet kind of power that doesn't need to speak loudly. The store manager passed by and adjusted the sign on the wall behind the bestseller shelf. A quote had been etched in new vinyl lettering, newly installed. My quote. The one that was never published. The one they all laughed at. I am not a character in someone else's story. As Sooyeon walks home, her phone buzzes. A message from her publisher. The crop quote has been nominated for the National Literary Honor. We'll need your final author statement. She stops on the sidewalk, stares up at the sky. Ian smiles. A message from my publisher blinked at the top of my screen. Final author statement needed. Ceremony speech due this Friday. Attached was the event lineup, a literary gala, a reading panel, a round table of authors I once thought existed in another world, distant, unreachable, untouchable. I closed the laptop. Outside, late autumn sun poured through the curtains, tracing shadows across the floor in long, golden slants. My coffee had gone cold on the windowsill again. I didn't reach for it. Instead, I stood and walked to the far side of the room, toward the shelf where I kept the box. Not a trophy case, a memory vault. Inside were drafts. Old notebooks, press clippings I never hung, and Dayun's journal. Still sealed. I never published it, never quoted it, never leaked it to anyone, though I could have. It would have been easy. One screenshot, one interview, one public thread of what really happened. But that story wasn't mine to tell. She gave it to me not as an offering, but as a confession. And I'd received it not as a weapon, but as a closing line. There was no satisfaction in exposure, only emptiness. Though I wrote something new, a different manuscript. No revenge, no villains, no blood under the fingernails of the prose. This one wasn't about her, or me. It was about beginnings. Messy, earnest, unbeautiful beginnings. It didn't try to be profound. It didn't whisper for justice. It exhaled. A closed laptop sat beside my writing desk now, the new manuscript saved under, untitled, First Light. My original yearbook sat in a donation box near the door. Its pages were worn, corners curled, spines softened with time. I'd stopped being afraid of what it held. It no longer felt like a scar. Just an artifact, a past version of myself I could finally look at without flinching. The night of the panel arrived, quietly. The event hall was intimate. Dark wood panels, soft lighting, velvet stage curtains. A podium waited under a single spotlight. Behind it, an arrangement of folding chairs with name tags. My seat read, S.Y. Han, feature author. I stepped into the room, alone. No cameras again, my choice. I wore a dark green coat buttoned to the collar, hair tucked behind my ears, a pen in my coat pocket, more for comfort than need. The host introduced me gently. She gave us the cropped quote, a story that never demanded recognition but left none of us untouched. For the first time, she's agreed to read a short excerpt aloud. I approached the mic slowly. The air was warm, heavy with breath and expectation. My pulse was steady, my voice clear. I never got to share my original yearbook quote, I said, the one that was replaced, mocked, forgotten. A pause. I think I'll read it now. I pulled the slip of paper from my pocket. The original draft. Creased, yellowing slightly, ink faded at the edges but still legible. I am not a character in someone else's story. I am the writer of my own. The room held its breath. Then the applause came. Not thunderous, not wild, but full, like a gentle tide reaching the shore after a long journey. Didn't stay for the closing statements. After the reading, I stepped out through the back exit, away from the stage lights, the soft murmurs of praise, the after-event photos. The hallway was quiet. Warm air brushed past as I pushed the exit door open. The alley outside was narrow and empty. A low breeze stirred fallen leaves against the pavement. And there it was, spray painted in white across the brick wall behind the venue, beneath a faded poster for a forgotten poetry night. She wrote it exactly as she meant it. I stared at it, breath catching. The handwriting was different, but I knew it was for me. Not because someone recognized me, because someone understood. I turned, the wind curling past my coat, and walked into the night with the quote still echoing behind me. Not as an apology, not as validation, or as proof. That voice, once cropped, now stood in full. As she walks away, a gust of wind lifts the top paper in the donation box. It flips open to the page where the fake quote once lived. Underneath, handwritten in new ink, a correction. This quote was never yours to erase. For the ones they called too quiet, the ones overlooked in group photos, who carried the weight without asking for credit, this story was always for you. Tell us in the comments, when did you stop shrinking and start writing your name in bold? Subscribe for more stories that speak softly and still echo. Because some voices aren't loud, but they're unforgettable.